Welcome to the Academic Woman Amplified podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Mazak, tenured full professor, mom of three, and firm believer that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. I talk to a lot of academic women about their writing practices. And one thing that I hear a lot of people saying is that they've studied other ways or learned other ways to get their writing done, but that those ways, those habits, those practices that they've learned in other places haven't been sustainable. And that what academic women are looking for is a sustainable writing practice. So in this podcast, I want to talk about what makes any practice sustainable and what makes really any change that we make in life sustainable. Okay, so that's the topic of our podcast. We're going to dig into that, and I'm going to give you some exercises to think about in order to make lasting, sustainable change in your writing practice. But first, I want to give a little caveat, and that is that sustainable practices are a moving target. They change as your career stage changes. So there's a saying in business, actually, in the entrepreneurial world that says, what got you here won't get you there. And that is absolutely true through the life stages of your academic career as well. So what I hear over and over again from the different women who I'm working with in our programs is, I used to be able to stay up all night and write as a grad student, or take a weekend and write for the whole weekend. These kinds of things that we might do early in our career, we don't really have any other tools to do those things to get our writing done. And so a lot of times it's a binge writing practice during the grad school years. And obviously not true for everyone, but many people do their PhDs full time. And so what that means is that they are really working on their writing projects. They're definitely pulled in different directions, but they're not pulled in as many directions as they are once they get on the tenure track. And so I hear a lot of early career women say, gosh, I used to do these things during my doctoral program to get my writing done, and those things don't work anymore. And that's partially, right, because the demands of early career faculty are really different than the demands of doctoral students. So once you get into the early career, you are all of a sudden, you're trying to, create this portfolio of work that is going to help you get tenured, and you have a limited time in which to do that. And then on top of it, you're teaching new preps and you're on committees and you're trying to figure out your place in the faculty culture. A lot of times getting a job, right, it requires you to move somewhere. So you're maybe in a new community. There's so many different career stresses, but there's also different life stretches as well. So practices that worked in one stage of our life, like perhaps before, when we were single, or when we didn't have an aging parent to take care of, or when we didn't have a baby, or whatever the different life circumstances you have are, maybe health circumstances as well, right? Like you might have had a different condition, physical condition at one point in your life that is now different. All of those factors make it so that as you move through your life, your practices aren't going to be sustainable. What got you here won't get you there. So that means we need to shift practices as we shift both career stages and life stages. So this absolutely happens as well from pre-tenure to post-tenure. I've been talking to a lot of post-tenure women about our new Elevate program, and it is really the same as talking to the pre-tenure women. They're saying what I used to do pre-tenure doesn't work post-tenure to get my writing done. So all of this is to say that sustainable practices are a moving target. They're going to change as your career stage changes, perhaps as your job itself changes, if you switch jobs, and also as your life stage changes. So what is sustainable is going to change over time. And so keep that in mind as I explain the next way to change habits. Okay. So the other day, first of all, I'm a big podcast junkie, right? I listen to podcasts all the time. Although I started out my career in college as a music major, if I'm in the car, I don't usually put on music. I usually put on a podcast, and I've always loved talk radio. And so I listen to a lot of different podcasts. And I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and it's a business podcast, and the person interviewed a woman named Brooke Castillo, who is a life coach. And Brooke Castillo has a life coach certification program, and she has a life coach school where you can sign up and learn kind of self-coaching and also get coaching. She's kind of a big deal in the life coaching world. So I knew her name, and then I heard her interviewed, and I went to her podcast and checked it out. And I just happened to listen to episode 300, I think. And in that episode, she kind of did a bookend episode. And what was in the middle of the bookends was her very first podcast episode. And what she did in that episode was kind of lay out how we make change in our lives. And what she said was, our thoughts influence our feelings influence our actions, and our actions influence our results. And I think she probably used the word determined in there instead of influence, but I don't like the word determined because I don't like to be like, psychologists, write in and tell me what words I should be using. But really, I don't like this kind of determined. Things are going to be different, like for each person, right? So I don't like to say our thoughts determine our feelings. Okay, so our thoughts, maybe they do create or influence our feelings influence our actions, and our actions influence our results. So I was like, okay, this is an interesting way to think about how things kind of work in our heads as we're trying to make change in our lives. And so what she said was, what a lot of people do is they focus on changing their actions in order to change their results. But actually, you have to work backwards a bit, and you have to first change your thoughts in order to change your results. And that really struck a chord with me, because so much of what I end up talking about when I'm trying to get people to write and publish more is really their thoughts, like their mindset, what they believe, what they want, the internal monologue that's going on in their heads around writing. We actually have to deal with that if we're going to see results. So let me give you an example, and you can think about whether this applies to you or, if you resonate with this. So we try to change our results by changing our actions or our habits, right? So again, and I dog on this method of writing every day, teaching people they have to write every day, but I'm going to use it as an example. And again, I will just say, if writing every day works for you, please, please do it. I just want you to do what works for you. But for a lot of people, and a lot of people tell me this, is that they like the approach that I teach, the Tiger Time approach. You can listen back to episode 2 for that, because it is not a write everyday method. So let's take, for example, someone who thinks like, okay, I want to write and publish more. And so I'm going to write every day. I'm going to write 500 words a day every day, or I'm going to write for half an hour every day or 15 minutes a day. And that's going to make me publish more. Okay, fine. But then what happens is we look for ways to kind of force ourselves to write every day. So we're forcing a habit change, right? We're just kind of, without doing any work on our thoughts or our feelings, we draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to write every day. And that's going to solve the results problem I'm having, which is that I'm not publishing enough. But as many of you have experienced, you can't sustain that, right? And something happens, somebody gets sick, you get sick, the semester kind of falls down on your head, and you end up having to break that chain. So then what happens? Well, when you can't sustain that change that you're trying to make, that change in habits, right? When you can't sustain the write everyday habit, for example, what goes through our heads is that we need accountability. And that's where you hear so much talk about accountability partners, accountability groups. And there's a lot of belief that what you need is other people holding you accountable in order to write more. And then if we read the subtext of that, what you're really saying is that you are weak-minded. You don't have the dedication to do it yourself. You need an outside person making you accountable, or some kind of outside entity making you accountable. And what you're really saying when you say that is that you're broken, right? You can't do it yourself. You need somebody else to make you do it. And that is why I don't like the accountability thing. And also, that's how this idea of changing our actions in order to change our results fails. That's why when I heard Brooke Castillo talk about changing your thoughts, that's the real basis. Changing your thoughts to change your feelings, to change your actions, to change your results. That resonated with me much, much more. Because to make sustainable change in your writing practice, what you really have to do is change your thoughts. And here's what I mean by changing your thoughts, okay? So the first thing you need to do, here's where we come to the exercise. So here's the work that needs to be done if you've fallen into this trap of trying to change your actions in order to change your results without changing your underlying thoughts and feelings. So let me back up too and say that this is why I talk so much about how things feel, because your feelings are going to change your actions. And so when you feel good about your writing, your action that you're going to take is to write more. And when you feel bad about your writing, you feel guilty, you feel overwhelmed, the action that you're going to take is avoiding writing. So that's why I talk so much about how it feels, how to develop a relationship with your writing, how to create positive feedback loops between you and your writing, right? Because I want those feelings that you have towards your writing to be positive, because that will influence your writing actions, right? But let's go all the way back to what Brooke Castillo said, which is that thoughts influence our feelings, influence our actions, influence our results. So thoughts influencing feelings, let's talk about the thoughts. So if inside your head, you're telling yourself things like, in order to be a good academic, I have to work 80-hour weeks, or all the kinds of culture of academic negative thoughts that we could possibly be having, what you need to do is articulate those down so that you can change them. You can start to work on changing them. So here's the activity that I want you to do. I want you to actually take some time, some reflective time, and I want you to write down that list of thoughts. When you think about writing, what do you think about? When you think about your writing, what do you think about? When you think about yourself as an academic, what do you think about? And I want you to actually make a list of those thoughts. And then what I want you to do is turn that list on its head, and I want you to write the thoughts that you can replace those negative thoughts with. So for example, if you have in your head the thought, I'm a bad writer, I want you to really think about what can you replace that thought with? Think about anything good that has come out of your writing. And there are things, so think about them, figure out what they are, and start to write down some thoughts that you can replace that thought with. So if you think I'm a bad writer, then the replacement thought could be something like, I passed my dissertation with flying colors, or I love to write. So really, I want you to think about what is your inner voice telling you, and what thoughts do you need to replace those negative thoughts with? And if you have positive thoughts about your writing, then I want you to reinforce that, because that is what is creating those positive feelings, which is creating good actions around writing, which is creating results. So Brooke Castillo did not invent this idea that thoughts create your feelings, create your actions, create your results, but she articulated it so nicely, and it felt so much like it applied directly to how I work with writers that I wanted to share it with you. So in order to make sustainable change to your writing practice, you really need to start with changing your thoughts. And then try to use some of the things that I teach in earlier episodes of this podcast about changing your feelings, right? Changing how you feel about your writing, your positive reaction to sitting down and getting words on the page. And then try some actions like the Tiger Time method that can help you to get better results. But understand that your results of writing more are not going to be sustainable unless you work to change your thoughts about your writing practice. You are not wrong. You are not broken. You don't need an accountability group to strong arm you into getting your writing done. You need to change your thoughts. All right. I hope that you found some helpful nuggets in this episode. And I want to just let you know about some of our programs that are open and coming up if you like this podcast and you're interested in working with our team. So the first one I want to talk about is our Amplify program. Amplify is a year-long faculty writing accelerator program where we have lessons about the things I'm talking about right now. What we use to deliver this program is a combination of training, community, and coaching. And by training, I mean we give you workshops and a method for going up for tenure with confidence. We help foment peer mentoring and community through the way that we do unique group coaching. And we also have one-on-one coaching as part of the program. And those three things, teaching, community, and coaching, are the key to making sustainable change, right? We talk about all of these kinds of things related to our writing, how we feel about them. We give you ways to work together, like co-writing, and we create a year-long supportive experience for you so that tenure prep can feel more like inspiration and less like hazing. So the other program that I want to mention that we have coming up is our Academic Women's Writing Roadmap program. That is an online course, a recorded course with 10 modules and a supportive Facebook group that includes monthly office hours where you can ask us questions and get feedback. And the Facebook group is a place to submit your assignments and get feedback on your mission statement and that kind of stuff. And that it's a popular course that we will be opening again in May. So I know a lot of people have said, that they've wanted to do it, but they need to get funding. So now is the time for you to start looking for funding for the Academic Women's Writing Roadmap. And I have a podcast episode that we can link up in the show notes about how to ask for funding. It's like a 45-minute long episode that teaches you how to do it. So the Writing Roadmap course, just to give you like a brief timeline, will be opening for kind of pre-enrollment in April. So if you're interested in that, I suggest you start rounding up your funds now. And the best way to get detailed information about the roadmap is to get on our email list. And you can do that by going to join the Facebook group. And when you get to the group questions, pop your email in the chat. If you are listening to this podcast and you're like, I don't like Facebook, but I want to know about Kathy's emails, then you can write us at support@kathymazek.com and just say, hey, put me on the email list, and we will do it. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Think about how you can change your thoughts about your writing. Think about what those thoughts are. Have you even spent any time thinking about this? It's time to really dig into what are those internal messages you're telling yourself about your writing. Get them down on paper. Start to make change by changing those thoughts.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time loving on yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you'd like to continue the conversation, join the over 7,000 academic women in the I Should Be Writing Facebook group. Just go to facebook.com/groups/I Should Be Writing or search for I Should Be Writing inside your Facebook app. See you inside.